Jesus taught in secret for 11 years. The Pistis Sophia is the record, but this is not history. These revelations are addressed to you, specifically, to unlock something inside you that has been dormant. Here are the 3 teachings that will change your life. Now, before you dismiss that as exaggeration, consider what we actually know. After the resurrection, according to this ancient text, Jesus did not ascend and disappear, he stayed. For 11 years, he gathered his closest disciples, including Mary Magdalene, Philip, Thomas, and Andrew, and he began teaching something entirely different from anything he had spoken in public, something the crowds were never meant to hear, not parables, not moral lessons, direct transmissions about the architecture of the cosmos, the mechanics of the soul, and the forces that keep human consciousness imprisoned. And the document that recorded those private sessions was buried beneath the Egyptian desert for over 1,500 years. Ask yourself a simple question. Why would someone bury a teaching of Jesus? What could be so dangerous about the words of someone the entire world claims to worship? What kind of knowledge threatens not just one institution, but the entire framework through which humanity understands itself? Here is what most people miss entirely. The Pistis Sophia, pronounced Pistis Sophia, is not a gospel. It is not a retelling of miracles or parables. It is an instruction manual, a precise, systematic set of revelations addressed not to scholars, not to priests, not to theologians. It is addressed to anyone who has ever felt, deep within themselves, that something essential has been locked away, that there is a part of you, a knowing, a light that once burned clearly but now flickers behind walls you cannot name. If you have ever looked at the world around you and felt a strange, quiet wrongness, as if the rules of this place were designed by something that does not have your best interest at heart, then what Jesus reveals in this text will shake you to your core. Because he does not speak in vague spiritual generalities, he names the forces, he describes their methods, and he gives you, step by step, the exact process for breaking free. Because in the Pistis Sophia, Jesus identifies exactly 3 things. First, there is a divine light trapped inside every human being, a fragment of the original source, buried so deep that most people live their entire lives without sensing it. Second, there are specific forces, he calls them archons, whose entire function is to keep that light imprisoned through patterns you mistake for your own personality. And third, there is a precise path, a map of 13 stages, that allows you to reclaim that light and break free from the cycle entirely. 3 teachings. Each one was systematically removed from mainstream Christianity. Each one was declared dangerous heresy. And each one, when you truly understand it, applies directly to the struggles you face right now. Not metaphorically, not abstractly, practically, in the decisions you make today, in the thoughts that circle your mind tonight. Now here is what makes this deeply personal. These are not teachings meant only for ancient disciples in white robes walking through the deserts of Palestine. Jesus specifically tells Mary Magdalene in chapter 17 that these mysteries are for those who will come in later times. He is speaking about a future audience. He is addressing people who would one day discover this text and recognize themselves inside it. And the fact that you are here, right now, listening to these exact words, already tells you something about yourself that you may not fully understand yet. Something that the first teaching will make disturbingly clear. But before we go there, you need to understand what happened to this document and why you were never supposed to find it. The Pistis Sophia survived only because someone, and we do not know who, hid it inside a sealed codex in Upper Egypt. It was rediscovered in 1773 and purchased by a British physician named Anthony Askew, who had absolutely no idea what he was holding. It passed through several hands before landing in the British Museum, where for over a century it sat untranslated, ignored, classified as Gnostic nonsense by scholars who had never read it. And while it gathered dust on that shelf, millions of people across the world continued attending churches built on an incomplete version of what Jesus actually taught, the approved version, the sanitized version, the version that kept the power structure intact. But the version hidden in the Pistis Sophia does the exact opposite. It transfers the power back to you. It tells you that you do not need permission, intercession, or an intermediary to access the divine. And that, more than anything else, is precisely why it was buried. And that is precisely why it was buried. Now, there are layers of this teaching that go far beyond what I can share openly in a video like this. The original invocations, the specific practices Jesus gave for dissolving the counterfeit spirit, the parts that were considered too dangerous even for the outer circle of disciples. I gathered all of that into something I call the Sophia Codex. It is a private audio collection, and it exists for one reason: for those who are hearing this right now and feeling something stir that they cannot explain. If that is you, the link is in the pinned comment below this video, but do not go there yet. Because what we are about to uncover next, the first teaching about the light trapped inside you, is what makes everything in the Codex make sense. So what exactly is this trapped light that Jesus says exists inside every human being? So what exactly is this first teaching that was so threatening? What is this trapped light that Jesus says exists inside every human being? And why does he warn that most people will live and die without ever knowing it was there? In chapter 39 of the Pistis Sophia, Jesus makes a statement so radical that it would have collapsed the entire religious framework of his time. He tells his disciples that every human being carries within them a fragment of the original divine light, not a metaphor, not a poetic image, an actual luminous substance that was placed inside you before birth and then deliberately concealed. He calls it the light power, and he describes it as a piece of the infinite source that was woven into your soul before you entered this world. Now think about what that means for a moment. If every person already carries the divine within them, what exactly do you need a priest for? What do you need a church for? What do you need any institution to mediate between you and the source of all things? The answer, of course, is nothing, and that single idea was so dangerous that entire libraries were burned to keep it from spreading. The Council of Constantinople in 553 specifically targeted these teachings. They did not argue against them. They erased them. Jesus goes further. He explains that this inner light did not simply get hidden by accident. It was captured deliberately by forces he describes in extraordinary detail. He tells Mary Magdalene that when a soul descends into the material world, it passes through what he calls the counterfeit spirit, a false layer that wraps around the light and convinces you that the voice in your head, the one filled with fear and doubt and endless repetition, is actually you. It bonds to you at birth. It learns your language, your emotional triggers, your deepest vulnerabilities, and it uses all of that to generate one thing: unconscious reaction. Have you ever wondered why certain negative thoughts seem to loop inside your mind with mechanical precision? Why the same patterns of self-sabotage appear in your life over and over, no matter how many times you try to change? Why you can understand a problem intellectually and still feel powerless to stop repeating it? According to Jesus in this text, that is not a flaw in your psychology. That is not a failure of willpower. That is the counterfeit spirit doing exactly what it was designed to do, keeping your light dim, keeping you distracted, keeping you asleep. And here is where the ancient text meets modern experience in a way that should disturb you. Jesus describes a system where the light inside each person is siphoned off through emotional reactions: fear, anger, jealousy, compulsive desire, chronic anxiety. Every time you are pulled into one of these states unconsciously, without awareness, without choice, he says, your light power diminishes. It leaks out. It feeds something that is not you. Now that language, as strange as it sounds, maps almost perfectly onto what modern psychology calls the default mode network, the part of the brain that runs on automatic, generating repetitive thoughts, anxious projections, rumination about the past, and ego narratives that consume enormous amounts of mental energy without producing anything useful. Is it possible that what Jesus described 2,000 years ago as the counterfeit spirit is the same mechanism that neuroscience is just now beginning to identify? Is it possible that the ancient Gnostics mapped the architecture of human suffering before we ever had a brain scanner? But here is the part they really did not want you to hear. Jesus does not simply describe the problem, he gives the solution. In chapter 112, he explains that the light can be recovered, that the counterfeit spirit can be recognized and its grip weakened progressively until it has no more power over you. Not through prayer to an external deity, not through ritual, not through obedience to any institution, but through a process he calls the mystery of the ineffable, which begins with one single act: recognition. Simply seeing the counterfeit spirit for what it is. The moment you become aware that the fearful voice in your mind is not you, that the patterns repeating in your life are not organic but installed, that the emotional reactions draining your energy are mechanical and implanted, in that very moment, Jesus says, the light begins to recover itself, not because you forced it, because you stopped feeding the thing that was stealing it. This is the first teaching. You are not broken. You are not sinful. You are not fallen. You are carrying a divine light that has been deliberately buried under layers of forgetting. And the first step to reclaiming it is not belief. It is not faith. It is direct, unflinching recognition of what has been done to you. The question is, if this teaching is so liberating, who exactly decided that you should never hear it, and what were they protecting? That brings us to the second teaching, where Jesus names the forces responsible for keeping your light imprisoned. He calls them the 12 archons, and their methods of control are far more intimate and personal than anything you might expect. Most people, when they hear the word archon, imagine some kind of cosmic demon floating in outer space, some shadowy figure on a throne beyond the stars. And that misunderstanding is precisely what keeps this teaching powerless, because when Jesus describes the archons in the Pistis Sophia, he is not talking about distant monsters. He is describing something that operates inside your own mind every single day, right now as you listen. In chapters 31 through 36, Jesus lays out a map of 12 ruling forces, each one associated with a specific emotional distortion. The first archon governs compulsive desire, the kind that makes you reach for something you know will harm you. The second governs ignorance disguised as certainty. The third governs fear, not the useful kind, but the paralyzing fear that stops you from acting on what you know is true. The fourth governs confusion, the fog that descends the moment you get close to a genuine insight. And it continues through 12 distinct states, each one a psychological trap that keeps the soul locked in repetitive behavior. Now here is what is extraordinary. Jesus does not describe these archons as beings you must fight with swords or prayers. He describes them as patterns, automatic programs running inside the human experience. And each archon, he says, has a face that it presents to the soul, a mask, something that makes the pattern feel like it belongs to you. That is why you have never questioned it. Think about your own life for a moment. Is there a pattern that keeps repeating no matter how much you try to change it? A relationship dynamic that appears again and again with different people but identical emotional texture? A fear that controls your decisions even though you know it is irrational? A compulsive behavior that drains your energy but feels impossible to stop, as if something other than you is pulling the strings? According to this text, those are not your weaknesses. Those are not character flaws. Those are the faces of the archons, and the reason they are so effective is that they disguise themselves as your personality. You say, that is just who I am. You say, I have always been this way. And in that exact moment, the archon wins, because you have identified with the very thing keeping your light imprisoned. You have mistaken the cage for your home. Now, this is where the censorship becomes understandable. Imagine if this teaching had spread through the ancient world. Imagine if millions of people suddenly understood that the forces tormenting them were not punishments from God, not evidence of original sin, not proof that they were fundamentally broken and needed to beg